Today's episode contains disturbing details of a recent tragedy that took innocent lives. Quick warning that it might be emotionally distressing for some listeners. Welcome to Unbroken the Podcast. I'm Savannah Levins. I started this podcast because in my life experience and working as a news reporter, I found everyone's been knocked down or blindsided or had their world seemingly turned upside down at some point. And for many people, it's cathartic to talk about their experiences out loud. And likewise, it can be therapeutic to hear other people's stories and know that there is light at the end of all darkness. If you have a story you'd like to share on the podcast, I'd love to hear from you. Just email unbrokenthepodcast@gmail.com. And please rate, review, and subscribe. Today on the podcast, we have Megan. Less than a month ago, she was in class at UNC Charlotte when a gunman stormed in and started shooting. Drew Piscaro, Rami Al-Ramadan, Emily Hoped, and Shonda Hart were injured but survived. 19-year-old Reed Parlier and 21-year-old Riley Howell were killed. Here's Megan.
All right, today on the podcast, we have Megan. Megan, thank you so much for being here. I know your pain and struggle is very recent, so I appreciate it. We're just going to get right into it. You were in the classroom when this UNCC shooter opened fire on campus. You were in the class.
Yeah.
Can you just kind of walk me through that day, I guess, how it started and kind of up to that point?
Yeah, so it was just going like a normal school day. And I just remember it was our final presentations in the class, the last day of class. And some groups were presenting, others weren't. So luckily, some of the class wasn't there because they were not presenting that day. But then about half the class was, so that's still about 30 people. So we go, just kind of normal day, start out, teachers walking around, just kind of chilling with my classmates. We're in tables. We're in groups of like 8 at tables. So even like some of my table mates weren't there. There were, including me, 5 of us.
Okay. And what class is this, by the way?
It's a LBST class. It's kind of like an anthropology, kind of a sciencey class. Okay. So yeah, I do remember like it was during like the first group that had started to present, and they did a video. So they weren't even like up in the class speaking. It was like a video on the screens that we were watching, and there's a few screens around the room. So the video had started. I personally have forgotten what it was about, but I remember just sitting there in my chair with just watching it with classmates, and then it was about like 10 minutes into class, like maybe like 3 minutes into the video that they were presenting, you just heard 3 loud, super like ear-splitting bangs, like just 3 consecutive ones. That's what I remember. It's the first 3. And it's just like, I remember freezing and just not even knowing like what was that, because I never heard like some, like you've heard like guns in movies, but you don't hear them that close to you, not when they're like aiming at you and your classmates.
Yeah.
And it was just like silence. Like I remember my ears just going like silence. Like I know there was like obviously people screaming and noise, but I couldn't hear anything. Like I blocked out the noise. And I just remember, I don't even remember like getting up or doing, like it was just instinctual. Like I just got up and ran. I saw everyone running, and I got up, and there was like the way my table was, it was really close to one of the classroom doors. There were 2 doors you could go, and he was on the other side by that door. So we were all rushing to the door where I was, where like my group was sitting near. And next thing I knew, I was on the ground getting trampled for like, I don't remember how long, a good while.
Really?
Yeah.
So it was just everyone's trying to pour out of the same door.
Yeah, it was one single door. It's just like 30 students trying to pour out of it, you know.
How long were you on the ground? You said you were being trampled?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. What was that? I mean, what was going through your head? Was it just a
not
blur?
much. Like, just, I couldn't think in that moment. It was just so instinctual, like I said.
How did you eventually get up and run? Did you just pick yourself up?
I just got up. I just did it somehow.
Did you see that it was a shooter, or were you just panic run?
Just panic run, like everyone else.
So once you got out of the classroom, what happened then? What was that like?
Yeah, I got back up, ran out. Because to get out of the building we were in, there were like 2 more sets of doors, but those were like bigger doors. It wasn't one single door anymore.
Yeah.
So I ran out of those. And only after I was out of the building, like, I did start to, like, hear stuff again, and then that's where I was like, okay, like, this just happened. That's where I could actually, like, start to think again. And I was out of that instinctual mode. So I was running that day. We were all just running in different directions, just trying to get away from Kennedy. I didn't even know where to go. And then I saw, like, one of my classmates that sat next to me. And so I followed him into the career center, which is attached to, like, the library. Mm-hmm. And then we went into, like, this other class where there were people sitting, and we were like, shooter, just...
So you guys were telling other students, like, get out. Oh, my gosh.
And then with those people we found, we went into a room, and we barricaded it, and apparently we were in there for hours, but, like, to me, it was just... Time was just crazy, you know?
Yeah. Because you didn't know if there were other shooters or what was going on, so you wouldn't want to, because my thought would be I would run outside and run right home, but you didn't know what the heck was going on at that point.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So when you guys were barricaded in there, do you remember anything about that time, like talking to your, peers and stuff like that?
Yeah, I do remember that a little bit more clearly, just talking to them. They were calling their parents, just trying to figure out what was going on, looking at, like, the news, and there was a 9er alert. I know we were looking at that, too.
Yeah, the 9er alert, for those who don't know, it's the college campus alert that sends out, and it said something like, run, hide, fight, active shooter in the building. Did you call your loved ones at that time? And what were those conversations like? I can never imagine that.
They were just glad that I was safe, and it was just like, you had to, like, cut it short. I couldn't, like, explain everything, because it's like he could be in the building with us, so... Just letting them know I was safe and I was barricaded and what was happening.
So you guys were trying to, like, be quiet? And,
yeah.
Oh, man. So when did you eventually get to leave? When did you...
When the SWAT team came.
Okay. Tell me about that. Did they just come into the room where you were? And
yeah, they, like, kind of busted down the door. They, like, opened it, and they were just like, everyone put your hands up. One by one, we're going to, like, search you. And then they let us out. And then after that, I was a witness, so I went with the police and was, like, getting interviewed. Then after that, I was just chilling with, like, friends, just trying to process what happened.
Mm-hmm. I can't imagine going through all that. Was it just adrenaline pumping through you? Were you thinking about anything at all?
It was definitely, like, instinctual. Mm-hmm. It was definitely flight or fight mode. Mm-hmm. I was definitely in that, like, instantly.
When you learned that 2 people in your classroom had been killed, when did you learn that information?
I think, like, later that night. Mm-hmm. And I know they were, like, saying, like, 2 were injured, or 2 were dead, sorry. And then, like, 4 were injured. I don't know if I knew the names then. I think it was the next day was where I found out all the, like, information.
When you learned that information and learned kind of what you had escaped, how did you go about dealing with that?
Just in shock. Like, the first few days were really difficult, just trying to process, because it still hadn't sunk in. I was still just like, did this happen? And it was just like, at night I'd be, like, back in the classroom reliving it in my dreams.
Ugh. Did you lean into your loved ones at that time? I mean, I imagine maybe you didn't want to put too much on them, but at the same time, like, did you kind of curl up into yourself, or how did you kind of deal with that part of it?
A bit of both. Mm-hmm. The next day I did hang out with friends, and my parents did come in town to see me. So I did get to see everyone and be around people. But at the same time, I was also trying to understand myself and what I needed in the moment.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is the only time I'm going to ask about this, because I feel like I never want to focus on the shooter. But when you learned the name, did you know that student?
No.
No, you didn't. They were saying, maybe he was in that class or something, or no?
That's
you
what
didn't
they
recognize him?
said, that he was in there. He started in the class, but he would have been at a different table. He was not one of my table mates, so I personally didn't recognize him. But one of my friends said, oh, he does look familiar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What I do want to talk about is one of the students in particular, Riley, who died. It came out later that police said he went for the shooter and tried to tackle the shooter and take him down, and that's when he lost his life. What was that like for you to know?
Well, since I was getting trampled, it's very likely that if Riley didn't do that, then I'd be dead. So it was very, like, he really did just save my life.
Oh, my gosh.
So just being really thankful and just, like, Riley, thank you so much.
Yeah. You and I met at the March for Remembrance, and you went up and said a couple words. That was like a few days after the shooting, and that's something you said was, "Riley, thank you." Yeah. Was that hard for you to get up and talk?
Yeah, a little bit, but it was also like I just knew like I had to do it, and I wanted to.
So it's been a bit of time now. How are you healing now? How are you doing now?
Definitely taking it day by day. Like I said in the beginning, it was hard, but you just have to like focus, and you have to let yourself go through the motions. Like when you feel the tears coming on, you've got to cry. You've got to like let things out, and you've got to find healthy ways, healthy coping mechanisms.
So before this happened, obviously you had heard about school shootings. We all have. You know, you see them in the news. Did you think ever that maybe that could happen here? Because I feel like, you know, people are divided in that, where they're like always ready for it to happen because that's just the world we live in, or they're like, that will never happen to me. What side of that were you on?
So I was like, maybe it'll happen in like my university, but I never once thought it would be in the classroom I was sitting in.
Yeah. You didn't see any of it, right? You were just focused on getting out, and
if I did, it's been blurred out.
Yeah.
I can't remember like the moment until I got to the door. So if I saw something, I can't remember it.
Man. What's been the hardest part about coping with all this for you?
I would definitely say there's this one thing that I heard, survivor's guilt. I do feel that a lot, especially since like I made it out of the room. 2 of my classmates didn't, 4 more almost didn't. I felt a lot of guilt, but I do have to remember that what happened, and I can't change it. Even then, like I've been saying, it was flight or fight mode. I couldn't even think at that moment because I was like, I wish I had done more to help, but I couldn't.
No.
Because I couldn't even think about it in that moment. It was just get up and go.
Listen, survivor's guilt is incredibly real. I want you to know there's nothing you could have done. The Niner alert that was sent out that said, run first, that's what you needed to do. And I'm so glad that you're here. I mean, sitting across from me, your loved ones are so glad that you're here. There's nothing else you should have done but run. And I'm glad you're here and that you can continue this legacy now, because that's something else you mentioned in your talk at the March, was that you want to take this and use it to propel change. Can you talk a little bit about that and how this has kind of changed your life, your perspective, and who you are and what you want to do moving forward?
It's definitely given me a new perspective on life, just how fragile it is and how just lucky I am to be alive, because a lot of people do not make it this far. Even, like, I know we think of other countries when we say that, but in America alone, I've been looking at statistics, and it's over 1,000 children have died from guns this year alone. A lot of people do not, I'm 22, a lot of people do not make it to 22 in this country. 2 of my classmates are never going to make it to 22. So I'm just really thankful every morning when I wake up. Definitely thankful to be alive. Just thankful that my legs could run like that. It's incredible.
You got a little cut up, didn't you? When you were trying to, you got, your knee was hurt.
Yeah, my knee was really bad because I fell right on it when I was getting trampled.
You're a junior, so are you going back your senior year? You start in August?
Yeah.
What do you think that's going to be like?
Well, I don't have another class in Kennedy, so...
That's the building?
Yeah, that was the building that it happened in.
Do you think it's going to be hard going back, or do you think you kind of have a renewed strength?
I think it might be hard the first few days, but after being in a classroom for a while, I think I'll calm down a little.
Yeah. What have you learned about yourself through this whole process?
Well, one, that the human body is just incredible.
Yeah.
Just like the fact that my brain has been repressing the hardest moments, and just that like our bodies, the human body, can go into flight and just take care of a situation without us even having to think about it. It's just incredible to me that I've never seen my legs run like that. I'm so slow at running, and like I was one of the first people out of the classroom.
Yeah. I mean, when you think about all the things, all the cards that fell that day, where you're like sitting at the table that's closest to the door, you just happen to be there, you just happen to be close, you just happen to not be on the other side. Right. Is that kind of an overwhelming thought sometimes? It
is, yeah, because it's like, if I'd been on the other classroom, it might have been me.
Or the other side, yeah. The other side,
right.
Yeah. That's really tough. Something that, turning to the positive of all this, something that was really powerful for me to see was how much this community came together after that. Can you talk a little bit about that and kind of the renewed hope that you saw in that?
Yeah, for me personally, I've loved seeing everyone come together. I've loved seeing like the Charlotte Strong all over the city. It's on the light rails. It's posters around the city. Just seeing everyone come together and like random people like reaching out to me, making sure I'm okay, reaching out to others. So it's been great to see, like, because I know there's a lot of bad people in the world, as we've learned from this, but there's so many good people out there that even just random strangers, because it's hard now for me to like go some places because it's just like you don't know what a stranger's going to do, but you have to realize that most people are good people that are just wanting to live their lives day by day. They just want the best for themselves and their family. And it's just, I heard something the other day, like I got to start seeing people through the eyes of love instead of the eyes of fear.
Yeah.
It's a work in progress, but
I've always said that, where, it's horrible doing these stories where these people are just horrible, but then for every one terrible person, there's 100 amazing people. Seeing the way the community came together after that was really amazing. You feel like you have a good support system now in your healing?
Yeah, I feel like I could have like any random person in the city, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because even, random people, when I was like out one day with a friend getting ice cream, I started talking about it, and like she overheard and like came and touched my shoulder, and it's like I didn't even know her, but it's just incredible to me that like a random person can care so much and be there for you.
Yeah. The 6 students in your classroom who were shot, injured, did you know any of them very well, or?
Not close. We were never like, I was never close friends with any of them. Yeah. I did recognize them after being in the classroom, but like I said, we were in tables and we did like a lot of group work, so they weren't at my table, so they weren't anyone I was close with.
Yeah. I know you said you credited Riley for saving your life. This is a hard question, but if you could speak to his family, what would you want them to know?
I would just say thank you for raising such an incredible person, someone who's willing to sacrifice for others.
Yeah. What do you want people to know, and just the general public to know about, anything based on your experience, anything that you've learned that you think people should be aware of?
That's a big question.
I know, that's a big one.
I guess what I would say to others is don't live in fear, don't be afraid. Because like I said, there's so many good people out there.
Yeah. That's really strong of you.
Thank you.
What gives you strength now?
Just, I don't know, taking it day by day, just going, I'm alive, I can do anything. I'm alive right now.
Is there anything you want to see happen as far as laws, rules, legislation, worldview? What do you think needs to change in this world?
So I do think that we need something. I'm not like an extremist. I'm a moderate, so I do like to see the middle ground, and I think a lot of people relate to that middle ground, thinking we do need to check mental health, because if mental health had been there, this guy would have not gotten a gun. A lot of the shooters would not have gotten a gun. And I do know people that have guns, and a lot of them do agree with me that we need stronger background checks or like educational programs so people know, like, because a gun is a right, but it's a huge responsibility, and not everyone is ready to take on that responsibility. And there is a lot of training, a lot of education that needs to go behind that. Kind of like with getting a car, like you have to go through so many steps to get a car. But to get a gun, you can just walk right in, and next thing you know, you've got a weapon that can kill people.
Have you done a lot of research on this since that happened? I know you said you were doing a lot of Googling. Yeah. Was that kind of part of the process for you, trying to understand this?
I do think so, because along that process, I was looking into others who had survived, going back from like Columbine, and there was this one guy, I can't remember his name, but he lost his sister and 2 of his friends. He was hiding under a table with him, and they got shot. And he talks about like survivor's guilt, and then like another survivor talked about how like years later she's still dealing with this. So that resonates with me personally, because it's like it's been almost a month now, and I know a lot of people have started to move on, but like some stuff you don't really move on from. You do like learn to cope with it, but you're not the same person. You learn to go on and live with it, which is, I think, what's going to happen with me and a lot of my classmates.
Yeah. I want you to take care of yourself. You know, one story that stood out to me so much after Parkland was one of the survivors of that shooting recently took her own life. Mm-hmm. And, you know, they learned later it was just survivor's guilt she was dealing with. So I really take care of yourself. Know that you did the best thing for you, and that we're all so glad that you're here and that you have a message and a story now that you can carry on and share with others, like on this podcast, people who might be, you know, your story might be resonating with them. You've got a lot to do in this life for sure. So keep that in mind. Is there any final words that you want to say before we wrap this up?
I guess just going off of what I said earlier, like, don't live in fear. Keep living your life. But know that there's moments where you can break down. There's moments where it's okay to not be okay. There's moments where, like, you might be in a room with a lot of people and something reminds you of it. It's okay to leave that room and take a moment for yourself. Yeah. It's okay to feel your emotions. Like, you have to. As humans, you have to feel stuff in order to heal from it. You can't bottle stuff up and expect to heal. We have to learn that emotions aren't weak, that it's human to feel. And we got to feel those emotions if we want to overcome, if we want to learn to, like, trust people again, if we want to learn it's okay to sit in a classroom again. Learn it's okay.
Yeah. We have listeners, people who listen to this podcast from all 50 states and multiple countries. Some people might be listening who have gone through a shooting situation or have lost someone to it. Is there any advice you would give to someone who's, like, going through it and really trying to deal? I know you're in the middle of it too right now, trying to deal, but is there any advice you would give to others?
I would say, again, what happened. If you are a survivor, you can't change it. You've got to find healthy coping mechanisms to deal with any kind of survivor's guilt, any kind of sadness you might feel. You know, you've got to pray if you're religious, or you got to meditate, or you got to journal, or you got to exercise. If you listen to music, like, there's so many coping mechanisms. Talk to a counselor. That's a big one. I can't believe I didn't say that one first.
Yeah, yeah.
You've got to find ways to deal with it, because you're alive for a reason. Like, that's what I realized. If I was meant to die, I would have died. Like, I was getting trampled. I was in that classroom for a longer time. If I was meant to die, he would have got me. But I'm here, and anyone who's listening right now, your heart is beating. You're meant to be here. You're alive. We're all meant to be here for a reason. And just know that it's okay to break down. It's okay to not be okay. That's a part of being human. It's a part of dealing with trauma. It's a part of moving on from, well, not really moving on, but learning to cope with it. It's just a part of the healing process. You've got to take it day by day sometimes hour by hour, but next thing you know, you've made it through the day, you've made it through the week, you've made it through the month.
Ugh. You've got me crying now. No, don't be sorry. I mean, that's so true. And I think it's going to resonate with so many people who are going through, no matter what it is you just got to let yourself feel sometimes. And I feel like in today's society, it's all like, bottle it up. Don't show your feelings. Don't show your emotions. Just be tough, be strong. And that's great. But man, you got to let yourself feel sometimes.
You got to feel it.
Yeah.
If tears are coming, then that's what you need at the time. You got to let those tears out, you know?
Mm-hmm. Megan, thank you so much for being here. Stay in touch with me. I want to make sure you're okay. You seem like you're doing great and coping with this in a very healthy way, which I think is great. And good luck at your next semester, your final year in school. I wish you all the best. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you. And thank you, listeners, for listening to Unbroken, the podcast. We'll see you next time.